have a liftoff, and it's lighting up the areas. It's just like daylight here at Kennedy Space Center as the Saturn V.
I like people, but more than that, I like to get people talking. I like how seemingly insignificant conversations, random interactions, can lead to positive outcomes, partnerships, and achievements. Every day, I listen to people tell me their ideas, ask for help, tell me things they need. And as I'm part of those conversations, I'm taking mental notes. I notice one person needs something another has to offer, someone is struggling with an obstacle that someone else has already learned to overcome. I consider myself a social weaver. This framework I use is inspired by the Aspen Institute's Social Fabric Project, and it says that meaningful connections can happen from positive interactions. I like to think that I have these loose threads, and I'm finding ways for them to intertwine to make a strong and beautiful fabric. It's not always so deliberate. Sometimes I just lay out the pieces, and they find their way to each other. I work in a space where these small interactions happen all the time. Every day I witness what is possible when you put people who are looking to bring new technologies to market and surround them with the expertise, creatives, and infrastructure needed to launch companies. My favorite time of day in this space is really early in the morning. I love getting in and seeing whiteboards covered with words, formulas, plans to take over new markets. I hear the humming of 3D printers as they create the next iteration of a product. I hear a phone alarm go off because someone stayed up extra late writing that one more line of code. Over the past 4 years, I've led one of the most diverse high-tech incubators in the Southeast. Once an old skateboard park is now home to a bus network of founders and digital nomads who I seemingly have no formal connection to each other. The collisions that have happened have launched products that have created a global impact on people's lives. I am here to tell you what is possible when you systematically and intentionally create a space where people can take big swings, where no one expects anything in return for the help offered, no equity is exchanged, where a give-first culture is nurtured, celebrated, and protected. Let me give you an example. There is a company who I work with who over the past 10 years has been working to address sudden cardiac arrest in student athletes. Ever since their friend, their brother, their teammate died on the field during high school soccer practice. The young man who passed away was Rafe Macaron. His teammates came to learn that Rafe passed away from sudden cardiac arrest, and they came to learn that in other countries, when a simple ECG is used as a preventative screening tool, they've been able to reduce the incidence of sudden cardiac arrest in student athletes by 90%. His teammates could not get what happened out of their head. They had to do something about it. So they formed a nonprofit, they took a grassroots approach to building partnerships, to lobbying school districts to implement preventative screenings for all student athletes, and along the way, they saved countless lives. And over the past 10 years, they built up one of the largest databases of pediatric ECGs in the country. And one day, the founder of this organization, who works out of this space, just happens to be standing in the kitchen, waiting to warm up his food, and he's standing next to a data scientist that also works out of the same space, and they spark up a conversation. What do you do? What are you working on? And the data scientist starts asking a lot more questions. How do you do your screenings? What do you do with your data? And he says to the founder, in the end, aren't ECGs just images? Yeah, the founder says. Well, if they are images, couldn't you use artificial intelligence and machine learning to help you scale your operation? You see, the expertise needed to read these screenings, pediatric cardiologists, are a rare breed. In order for this organization to reach its ultimate goal, to make sure no one dies from a detectable ailment, they have to screen as many people as possible. The light bulb goes off. Fast forward 1 year later, and that company is getting ready to raise its first seed round of funding. They received a significant number of grants from Amazon Web Services, and a new, scalable technology is going to be brought to market. That conversation, that collision, that's a win for me. I take great pride in facilitating opportunities for these threads to intertwine. These small, beautiful entanglements create the strongest societal fabric. That is what I love to do. I've learned so much from working with startups over the past 4 years. Before that, I put in 3 hard years working to revitalize our downtown district, fostering resident attachment, creating a sense of culture, building a sense of place. It was in this role downtown that I saw the power of this weaving framework, how by having small conversations we could break down distrust, by bringing multiple people to the table, often with competing interests, and having them exchange their viewpoints and their networks, we were able to create systematic, lasting change for our community. I have witnessed that when you are focused on creating a community where you can take risks and feel an ownership over the community as a whole, you can help create a more equitable environment for those who would not normally have access to the expertise and capital needed to bring a new technology to market. Startups epitomize social capital. Social capital is the benefits we get from connections to others. It's how our strong ties, our friends, our families, our colleagues, and sometimes most importantly, our weak ties, the person we see a couple times a year at a conference, open up doors of opportunities. Social capital is how we get jobs, it's how we gain access to new experiences, it's how norms are transferred and different habits are formed. Through the facilitation of social capital, through weaving these networks together, you can help level the playing field and increase one's chances for success. To put it simply, startups thrive when they are surrounded by the right type of social capital. And that type of social capital can only be fostered when you holistically address the needs of startups. Startups need ecosystems. Startup ecosystems are living, breathing organisms that, when done right, are constantly changing, shifting, and evolving. Startup ecosystems are infrastructure marvels in that they hold so much within their walls. People within these buildings have made huge sacrifices. They've taken big risks. They live in the future. And infrastructure is so critical to the process to have a space to ideate and to build, and it has to be there in a way where it is needed and is appreciated, but is of no concern to the founder. Because startups are different. Their needs are great and highly specialized. Startup founders and their teams don't know if they're going to eat ramen for the next year or close millions of dollars in funding. They are not looking to create small, stable teams. They are looking to scale quickly and impactfully beat out their competition. Startup founders in my building have mortgaged their homes, they go without salaries, they duct tape their bumpers on their old beaten up cars, all for a chance of living their dream, to have that big exit, to leave their mark on the world. We recently had a startup in our ecosystem raise over $60 million for some of the most prestigious funds in the world. In most cases, that would be a story we read about and celebrated, but was not accessible to us. But when you are focused on creating a community with an intent to collaborate and give back, you can create an environment where the founders of those startups take an invested interest in the young founders around them, who use their networks and their tactical knowledge to open up doors of opportunities for others, who see a young founder looking puzzled at their financials, and they don't just keep on walking. They say, hey, come eat lunch in my office. Let's work on this. That type of culture, those types of connections do not just happen. One has to be intentional about curating them and creating a space where they can exist in the first place. There is one other unique aspect about this ecosystem. It has 5 distinct buildings. Those buildings are there because companies created the need for them. As they outgrow their small offices, they are able to move into larger adjacent spaces. This is key for several reasons. As companies raise their first rounds of funding, they can keep their infrastructure costs low, allowing them to invest more into their people, their technology, and scaling their operation. Normally, when a startup outgrows an incubator, they go get a traditional office space, and the gap between those who have navigated the funding process and those who are looking to widens. But because we are able to keep startups all along the same street, we are fundamentally facilitating the exchange of social capital. Having companies at different stages, focusing on different technologies, tapping into different industries is how we've been able to cross over $150 million in outside venture funding. No one would expect that an incubator on Irwin Street in Melbourne, Florida, would have access to that much capital in a county that's been historically dominated by government entities, where there's no history of exits, where the infrastructure and the culture did not exist. We've been able to cross this milestone by seeking out those with the expertise in the networks and then intertwining our networks to theirs. My latest initiative, one that I know will leave a legacy of new opportunities for my community, is the opening of a prototyping lab. Additive manufacturing is the future. It's how we will build infrastructure on space. It's how we'll be able to gain control over our supply chains. It's how companies in our ecosystem are able to quickly develop and reiterate on new products. Having a prototyping lab with an incubator is also rather unique, but highly intentional. Too many times we saw founders struggle with the initial means to create a prototype, not being able to reiterate on products to meet the demands of customers, or the catalyst for the lab itself, a part comes in wrong and a startup has no financial means to retool. So we did what any good entrepreneur would do. We took destiny into our own hands, brought everything a founder needs to launch right under our roof. The prototyping lab is how we will continue to expand our social capital as we create webs of entanglements the entire process of taking in an idea, turning it into a thing, building it into a product and technology that will have a global impact on people's lives. So I encourage you to think about how you can be a weaver in your community, how you can send out these tethers to break down disconnection, how you can use your social capital to open up opportunities for others who would not normally have access to it. I encourage you to think about how you could be a weaver to change your own life or to bring the next big opportunity to your community. Thank you.